Good evening. I think we're about to start the session. So could we have a bit of quiet, please? And could we have the music off? It's always a problem there. Welcome to the fourth or fifth session. I can't remember, there's been so many. For the fourth or fifth session of these Opus sessions, it's the sixth actually, thank you. Sixth session at Opus Private Room, where we've been discussing a broad range of issues as we are on the threshold of the 13th general election. The issues have been broad, expansive, and the purpose of these sessions essentially is to get expert, kind of specialist speakers to speak on a particular topic, and then have audience interaction, which is a prominent part of these sessions. Today we have two leading figures in the realm of law, who will, I think, speak a little more expansively than from just off the letter of the law. And on two subjects. One is the national and public interest requires Pakatan Rakyat to form the next federal government, which will be delivered by Tommy Thomas. And where things are, a state at the crossroads, which will be delivered by Malik Imtiaz. Tommy Thomas, as we all know, is a leading constitutional lawyer, been around forever. And Malik Imtiaz is a very well-known lawyer, immediate past president of Hakam. He's a writer, also been around forever. And since we're about the same age, I guess I've been around forever too. And one of the very significant things that we've come to understand or appreciate over the past few weeks is that as we have waited very intensely for the announcement of the general elections, and now that they're here, there seem to be very little by way of real ideas that are being presented up on the political platform. And one of these sessions is to look at other players and other actors and protagonists within the larger realm of politics to talk about what we might expect and what we might also hope to elicit from our political leaders. So the sessions will be, each participant will speak for about 20-30 minutes. And then we'll open up the floor for questions. So I'd like to invite Tommy to...
Need to have that. Can I carry my voice?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't, rather not.
Okay, all right.
That's possible. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, let me thank Edward Su and Charlie Chalea for this kind invitation, which I regard as a singular honor. I'm grateful that they've given me a free hand to choose the title for tonight's talk, which has just been announced. So the title recognizes the existence, I suggest, of objective reasons why a change of government is fundamental. Both our national interests, which is not identical with the public interest, require a change. Reform must urgently be undertaken by a reforming government. Now, if it is not acceptable for the United Kingdom or India to have a government in power for 56 successive years from 1957, why is it acceptable to us? Likewise, Australia or Japan. Indeed, also our ASEAN neighbors, Philippines, Thailand, and Indonesia, are leading on the democratic front far ahead of us. The proclamation of independence that was read by Prime Minister Tunku Abdul Rahman when he received Merdeka on the 31st of August 1957 contained these stirring words, and I quote, "The federal constitution provides for the peaceful and orderly advancement of Malaya as a constitutional monarchy based on parliamentary democracy." I emphasize parliamentary democracy. Tunku ended that proclamation with, again I quote, "With God's blessing, Malaya shall forever be a sovereign, democratic, I emphasize democratic, an independent state founded upon the principles of liberty and justice and ever seeking the welfare and happiness of its people. Thus, we began the journey into independence 56 years ago as a parliamentary democracy based on the Westminster system. Inherent in that system is the real probability of a change of government at the conclusion of general elections to be held once in 5 years. What was not envisaged was a government from one party or one coalition to rule forever. Hence, a peaceful change of government is contemplated in our system. Such a change is absolutely foreseeable. When it happens, it's not going to be a revolution. There is nothing to fear but fear itself, as President Roosevelt once declared. Unfortunately, right from the beginning of nationhood, the Alliance Coalition took small steps to incrementally increase and consolidate power and to take control over institutions that were intended to be independent, impartial, and neutral. Over time, major institutions of the state like Parliament, the Elections Commission, the police, the Attorney General's chambers, the civil service, universities, and the media were politicized and became partisan. Institutions that were intended to act as a check and balance on the power of the executive branch of government failed to do so. The result is a huge centralization of power in the hands of the Prime Minister, reaching its apogee under our most authoritarian Prime Minister, Dr. M. Hence, the first casualty of one-party rule is the collapse of our major institutions. What began as a three-party coalition in 1957 grew into a 14-party coalition, the Barisan Nasional in 1972, which took over in the wake of the 1969 May riots and the NOC government, which had temporarily replaced parliamentary democracy. When Parliament was restored with its powers a couple of years later, UMNO's dominance became marked, and for 40 years its status as the most powerful decision-making institution in the country has never been questioned. A consequence of 56 years of continuous one-party rule is that the 13th general elections is in truth, I suggest, a referendum on UMNO's policies, not just those made by its current leader, the caretaker Prime Minister, and hopefully the former Prime Minister of Malaysia in 2 weeks' time, but policies also made by previous UMNO Prime Ministers. So what I propose to do, very briefly, is to consider some of these policies in the area of national life, in key areas of national life. But time will not permit me to talk about a lot of those areas, so I thought I'd just focus on economy. So all those who expected me to give a lawyer's speech, sorry, you're going to be disappointed. It's going to be more everything but the law. So let me focus on the economy and let me point out what bad policies have caused the Malaysian economy where it is in 2013. The first point I want to make is that our general point, our economy suffers from numerous structural and systemic problems. So I give some examples of the structural and systemic problems. The obsession with being a nation that manufactures and produces things or provides services that are cheap has meant that salaries are terribly low. We have an obsession about being cheap. Then next, about 4 to 5 billion immigrant workers, whether legal or illegal, and the absence of collective bargaining through trade unions have depressed further the wages of Malaysian labour. So that is a double whammy for our labour force. At the same time, about 1.5 to 2 million Malaysians of much better training and qualifications and experience are working abroad. So what kind of a trade-off is that? If all the Malaysians, just to give one example, if all the Malaysians leave Singapore overnight, that island would suffer terribly. Then cronyism and nepotism have scarred the economic environment. The lack of open and transparent public tender committees have resulted in friends of Barisan securing lopsided contracts which are against the interests of the public. The cost of living has substantially increased. Yet the basket that the government offers, often refers to and shows us, is always free of inflation. So one wonders where and what they are shopping. The gulf between the very rich, probably all of us in this room, though small in number, and the vast majority of Malaysians is widening. The middle class, on the other hand, and in fact at the same time, is shrinking. Then our overdevelopment of cities and towns with condominiums, office blocks, apartments, shopping complexes. There is a massive overcapacity and excessive building. There is no overall planning. Environmental damage is rampant. Then attracting the wrong kind of foreign FDIs, foreign direct investment. Just think of Linus. Surely after 56 years of independence, we can be choosy and selective about such investments. We have gone up the value chain and we don't have to be attracting the rubbish investment that we are often attracting. And then we give them massive tax breaks for a long period. So you have to ask the question, what benefit does a lot of these FDI provide to the average Malaysian? At the same time, outflows from Malaysia seem to overtake inflows. We have just been told by Global Financial Integrity, which was conducting an independent research, absolutely nothing to do with Malaysia, an independent research into the global offshore money scam and the maze that was around. And they said, according to them, about 870 billion ringgit left Malaysia in a 10-year period. Now in 2010 alone, 200 billion was siphoned out of Malaysia. So you know these records will not be accurate. So it's absolutely fair to say about $1 trillion left Malaysia in the last 10 years. And then the collection of tax revenue is terribly inefficient. Apparently, just over 1 million of our 10 million workforce paid income tax. So there's something terribly wrong there. And then apparently only about 30,000 Malaysians pay at the highest bracket, which is absolutely shocking. I just cannot believe 30,000 people are paying the highest bracket. Probably everybody in this room is paying at the highest bracket, but there's only 30,000 of us, so there's something terribly wrong. And then likewise, because of smuggling, custom duties and excise duty worth over 7 billion ringgit is annually lost because of alcohol smuggling, cigarettes and other items. And then finally, our national debt has increased to 55% of GDP. Now if one includes governmental guarantees and guarantees for GLCs and 1MDB and those things and other off-balance items, it will probably be near the 70% mark. Now having regard to what is happening in Spain, Greece and Cyprus and all the other European countries, this is absolutely reckless. So in many ways we came out of the 2008 Wall Street crisis, the global crisis, quite strongly, and yet in the 4 years of the Najib administration, our debt to GDP level has just gone up tremendously. So I thought I'd just focus on those policy decisions made by the UMNO government and say why you cannot have those kinds of policies continue. They often give the example, they often say, well, we are doing well relatively in any sphere of life. And they always say we have world-class this and world-class that. The truth is, the comparison for the economy ought to be South Korea. And why South Korea? In the 60s and 70s, South Korea with Taiwan and Hong Kong and Singapore and Malaysia were the tiger economies. Then they were known as the miracle economies. And then in 1997, 1998, when we had the 97 financial crisis, South Korea and Malaysia were among the worst hit, along with Indonesia. But what is significant, and you mustn't forget, is that South Korea in 97 actually received IMF aid. They got IMF monies. Whereas, of course, in Malaysia went the other way. We had capital controls and whatever. We refused to accept aid. That's fine. So in 1997, 15 years ago, Malaysia and Korea were at the same level. And look at where South Korea is today. So if you want to compare Malaysia, you compare with South Korea. And if you look at South Korea, their educational system, their functioning democracy, their science, their technology, their shipbuilding, there are universities. So please don't ever listen to anybody who says Malaysia is doing well. We are not. We should be on par with South Korea. And unless we are on par with South Korea, and I've not mentioned football so far. And football, we were better than South Korea in the 60s and 70s.